Judge, can you hear me? Oh, okay.
It was monstrous what she did, and she's got to pay for it.
Live birth porn.
The judge didn't just slam his gavel. He stood up, he walked out. Mid-hearing, in a federal courtroom. Because what happened that day wasn't just chaotic, it was catastrophic. And Blake Lively, she wasn't just watching it unfold. She was at the center of the storm. It was supposed to be a simple pre-trial hearing. A quiet day to review documents, outline schedules, and go home. No cameras, no drama, just paperwork. Instead, the courtroom exploded into chaos when a former employee stood up, completely uninvited, and dropped a revelation so explosive, the entire room froze. We're talking scissors, bleach, a locked supply closet, and a 6-word confession that rewrote the entire case. She paid me to stay silent.
And they were paid hush money, apparently, and Leslie Sloan, Blake Lively's publicist, and Ryan Reynolds' publicist, helped bury it.
From that moment on, it wasn't just a legal dispute. It became a firestorm. Allegations of violence, hush money, NDAs signed under pressure. And then the judge, who had seen it all in his career, looked at both legal teams, slammed his gavel twice, and said, "If this is the level of integrity I'm expected to work with, then you're wasting federal time. This is not Hollywood. This is federal court." Then he walked out, just like that. And here's the twist. This wasn't even the trial. This was the warm-up. And Blake Lively, she walked in as a co-founder. She left facing possible obstruction charges, a PR disaster, and a growing list of allies ready to flip.
When you're just like a flippant, arrogant, C-list actress who married another person who's arrogant and flippant.
2 days ago, inside a federal courtroom in Lower Manhattan, everything was supposed to go exactly as planned. Blake Lively, flanked by a high-powered legal team, arrived quietly. No cameras, no press frenzy. This wasn't a trial. It was a pre-trial evidentiary hearing, meant to be procedural. The kind of thing nobody talks about unless something goes terribly wrong. And something did. The courtroom was filled with attorneys, clerks, and 5 unnamed plaintiffs, former employees of Blake's now defunct lifestyle brand, Preserve. Across the room sat the prosecution. At the center, Judge Curtis Y.M. Lennox, a respected federal judge known for his composure and strict adherence to protocol. Everything was routine until it wasn't.
Blake's lawyer, when asked if she would testify, said, "The ultimate moment for a plaintiff's story to be told is at trial."
Just as the judge asked both sides for final clarifications, a woman in the gallery stood up. She wasn't scheduled to testify. She wasn't even acknowledged by her own lawyers. But she didn't care. With visible emotion, she started speaking directly to the judge, recounting a chilling incident that had never been submitted into evidence. According to her, in 2015, during a Preserve retreat in Aspen, Blake Lively lost control during a heated argument over a missed marketing deadline. She allegedly threw a full glass of red wine across the room. It shattered on the woman's shoulder, slicing through her blouse. She was rushed to a clinic under a fake name. The injury? 6 stitches, nerve bruising, but that wasn't the worst part. She claimed Blake's team paid her $40,000 in hush money on the condition she signed an NDA under pressure. She named Preserve's HR logs and internal Slack messages where employees allegedly joked about Blake's outbursts. The courtroom froze. The judge didn't stop her. Her lawyers didn't move. And Blake? She didn't blink, because the moment that woman spoke, everything changed. The silence in that courtroom didn't last long. As the woman stepped back, visibly shaking, Judge Lennox looked up, not with confusion, not with disbelief, but with anger. He turned to both legal teams and asked a question that would change everything. Were either of you aware of this incident or any other injury tied to the defendant's conduct and chose not to disclose it? No one answered. The defense mumbled something about character evidence. The prosecution began frantically flipping through their folders. The woman who'd spoken was quietly escorted out. Not arrested, not reprimanded, just moved. And that's when the mood shifted. The judge stood up. His voice sharpened. He slammed the gavel, once, then again. He called out both sides for failing to disclose material facts. He accused them of delaying discovery, violating court protocol, and possibly obstructing the case entirely. And then, without a recess, without a formal adjournment, he did the unthinkable. He walked out, No warning, no goodbye, just one final statement as he turned away. If this is the level of integrity I'm expected to work with, then you're wasting federal time. This is not Hollywood, this is federal court. The room was left spinning. Reporters began whispering. Attorneys on both sides looked like they'd just been blindsided by a semi-truck. And Blake? According to one person seated behind her, she looked pale, frozen, like she knew what was coming next. Because this wasn't just about bad press anymore. This was the beginning of a legal nightmare. With the hearing suspended, the court was now reviewing both teams for contempt. If either side knowingly concealed evidence, especially evidence involving a physical injury, they could be sanctioned, disbarred, or worse. And the real kicker? This wasn't even the trial. It was supposed to be a warm-up. Instead, Blake Lively's carefully polished reputation had just shattered, one glass of wine at a time. For years, Preserve was sold to the public as Blake Lively's passion project, an elegant lifestyle brand wrapped in linen, jam jars, and Instagram filters. But behind the perfectly staged flat lays was something far more toxic. According to testimony now submitted into the court record, Preserve wasn't just a failing business, it was a pressure cooker. Former employees claimed they were underpaid, overworked, and constantly walking on eggshells. 60 to 80-hour weeks weren't the exception, they were the rule. Raise a concern, you risked your job. Ask about overtime, you were labeled difficult. Push back against Blake's increasingly erratic behavior, you got pulled aside for a restructure conversation. And those NDAs, they weren't reserved for top executives. Even interns were allegedly offered severance packages in exchange for silence. Hush money disguised as a friendly goodbye. One former staffer described the culture as a smiling hostage situation. Another said Blake was like two different people, charming in public, terrifying behind the scenes. Several mentioned an internal Slack thread where team members routinely joked about Blake's blow-ups. Screenshots show phrases like duck and cover used before team meetings. But the most damning detail? Documents are rumored to exist. Settlement agreements, email threads, even HR memos with Blake's initials. Not a vague reference, not hearsay. Allegedly her signature on payouts tied to injuries and complaints. If these documents make it into evidence, it won't just be bad optics. It could redefine the entire case, from workplace mismanagement to deliberate concealment of harm. This wasn't a brand in trouble. This was a company built on fear, silence, and coercion. And with each testimony, that carefully curated image of Blake as the relatable, down-to-earth entrepreneur, it kept cracking. Because what the public saw was a Pinterest board, but what insiders experienced was a pressure chamber wrapped in soft lighting. And what came next would make that even clearer. For months, the media had a simple narrative. Blake Lively ran a company. Bernard "Bernie" Collins, her creative director, went rogue. He crossed the line with junior employees, and Blake, poor, unsuspecting Blake, just didn't know. But now, that entire story is unraveling because Bernie isn't staying quiet anymore. He's flipping, and what he's saying might be the most damaging revelation yet. In newly admitted testimony, Bernie's legal team claims that not only was Blake fully aware of the internal complaints against him, she encouraged him to keep pushing boundaries. Why? Because it made the brand look edgy. According to internal Slack messages submitted into evidence, Blake called one female employee's harassment report overblown sensitivity. When Bernie suggested firing her, Blake responded with, "Keep her on the payroll. She photographs well. Good optics." Yes, really, good optics. Another exhibit shows her mocking an employee who quit over Bernie's behavior. She didn't get the culture. We're not Whole Foods. Let that sink in. This wasn't a CEO blindsided by scandal. This was a leader allegedly weaponizing a toxic workplace to preserve a brand identity. And Bernie, he's not going down alone. His lawyer, Calvin Dre, told reporters that Blake's team orchestrated the internal damage control when allegations surfaced in 2016. That includes buying silence, protecting liabilities for appearances, and even scripting internal messaging to keep things under wraps. In short, Bernie says he was acting under direction. And now that he's cooperating, Blake's legal exposure just multiplied. Because if Bernie testifies that Blake orchestrated cover-ups, suppressed complaints, and used employee well-being as a branding tool, this doesn't stay a civil suit, it becomes something much darker. A case about power, protection, and image manipulation at the highest level. And for Blake Lively, the persona she worked years to perfect, poised, stylish, relatable, is being torn apart, message by message. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it did. If the legal firestorm wasn't enough, Blake Lively made one critical mistake. She dragged Taylor Swift into it. In the middle of mounting accusations, leaked Slack messages, and staff flipping on her in court, Blake reached out to her longtime friend, not for emotional support, but for cover. According to newly released text messages, now part of the court's sealed evidence under review, Blake personally messaged Taylor asking her to make a public statement defending her character. Not as a friend, as a lifeline. She wanted Taylor to publicly frame her as an unaware CEO, someone who had no idea what was happening behind the scenes at Preserve. The goal? Damage control before the media fully turned, but Taylor said no. Her response was short. She wasn't comfortable speaking on legal matters, and it wouldn't be fair to the women involved. A perfectly reasonable stance. Unless you're Blake Lively under fire, that's when things got ugly. Leaked texts show Blake lashing out. She wrote, "After a decade, you owe me. If you walk away now, don't expect me to fix what happens to your name when I speak up. I defended you in rooms that would have buried you." And the final blow? This friendship lives or dies by loyalty. Taylor's response was one sentence. That's not how loyalty works. The texts were allegedly leaked by a former Preserve executive who had access to Blake's PR planning sessions. He told the court Blake's team had been preparing a full media campaign to pressure Taylor into compliance, including using older interviews, backstage footage, and stylized edits for public sympathy. But when Taylor didn't fold, Blake didn't just lose a friend. She lost her shield. And when the texts hit social media, it was a digital detonation. Snake energy trended within minutes. Fan forums exploded. Even neutral outlets couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just a celebrity spat. It was a strategic betrayal, weaponizing friendship to spin a narrative. And in the eyes of the public, it was the ultimate red flag. Because while legal teams can spin paperwork and PR firms can reframe headlines, you can't PR your way out of threatening Taylor Swift. And Blake Lively had just crossed a line that couldn't be undone. By now, the courtroom wasn't just tense, it was radioactive. But the most damning blow hadn't even landed yet. Because when Judge Lennox demanded a full audit of Preserve's financial records from the years Blake Lively operated as co-founder, what her team submitted was, to put it mildly, a joke. Entire pages were blacked out. Sections labeled confidential, 5 payments were missing. And not just any payments, these were the exact transactions tied to the hush money claims made in court. The defense argued it was clerical discretion, but that excuse didn't stand a chance. Because hours later, the prosecution received a separate copy, unredacted, leaked by an internal whistleblower. The real report showed 5 private payouts totaling over $200,000, all tied to staff transition packages. 3 of them matched known employee names from earlier court filings. And all of them were signed within weeks of alleged incidents, including the Aspen retreat injury. Now, it wasn't just about what Blake did, it was about what her legal team tried to hide. And it got worse. 2 of the former employees who had already submitted testimony, they were contacted again by Blake's people. But this time, it wasn't legal follow-up. It was friendly check-ins, offers of image consulting, and in one case, a free subscription to a reputation management firm to scrub social media history. One witness claimed they were asked to reconsider the tone of their original statement. Another was offered a revised NDA with a higher severance. That's not damage control. That's witness tampering. When Judge Lennox found out, he didn't wait for closing arguments. He slammed his gavel, looked directly at Blake's attorneys, and said, "This is not a sandbox for celebrity image control. This is a court of law. And what you've brought in here is an intentional mockery of legal due process." Then, for the second time in 2 weeks, he stood up and walked out. No words, no warning, just silence. And that silence said everything, because now this wasn't just about hush money or harassment. It was about obstruction, manipulation, and a Hollywood sweetheart who may have just destroyed her entire legacy to protect a lie. The courtroom was in shambles, but outside, it was carnage. Within minutes of Judge Lennox's second walkout, news of the redacted financials and attempted witness manipulation leaked online. And when it hit social media, the effect was immediate, blistering, merciless, and global. Blake exposed. Justice for preserved victims, nach Hollywood silence culture. They were all trending, not just in the US, worldwide. And this time, it wasn't tabloid gossip. It wasn't fan theories or anonymous blind items. It was mainstream, verified, backed by court documents. Former co-stars unfollowed her. Celebrity blogs started pulling past interviews. Even gossip accounts that once idolized her flipped, reposting clips and captions that now felt haunting in hindsight. Every curated Instagram post, every red carpet moment, every soft-focus Vogue shoot suddenly felt like a lie. The Blake Lively that the public had known, the charming, effortlessly chic girl next door, was gone. In her place, a woman accused of running a brand built on intimidation, silencing victims, and manipulating public loyalty like a marketing strategy. And the public didn't just cancel her, they dismantled her. One post went viral comparing her to a female Weinstein with better lighting. Cruel? Maybe. But in the court of public opinion, perception is everything. And Blake's was imploding faster than her PR team could draft a response. Screenshots of her messages to Taylor Swift were reposted with captions like, "This isn't loyalty, this is blackmail." Others dug up old interviews where Blake spoke about empowering women and pasted them side by side with harassment testimony. Every piece of her brand was now ammunition. Every quote was a contradiction. And the worst part? She hadn't even gone to trial yet. The actual legal proceedings hadn't begun, but her reputation was already in ashes. Sponsors pulled deals. Brand partnerships vanished. A Hollywood career that took years to build, burned down in days. Because in 2025, the courtroom doesn't just have 4 walls, it has Wi-Fi. And Blake Lively just lost her case in the one arena no publicist can control, the internet. By the time the courtroom doors closed for the second time, it wasn't just a hearing that had collapsed. It was a career, a legacy, and a carefully curated public image that had been years in the making. Blake Lively didn't just walk into that courtroom as a defendant. She walked in wearing the last traces of Hollywood's trust, and she walked out with it stripped away by evidence, by betrayal, and most of all, by her own decisions. What began as a workplace dispute spiraled into something darker: obstruction, manipulation, alleged financial deceit, and friendships weaponized as legal leverage. And we're still only in the pre-trial phase. Judge Lennox has suspended proceedings, sanctions are under review. The preserved case, once sealed, is now cracking open. Internal HR logs, Slack messages, and financial records are all being reevaluated. And the prosecution, they're no longer looking at this as a civil dispute. They're quietly preparing arguments that edge closer to criminal. That includes potential charges for witness tampering, falsifying court submissions, and knowingly covering up workplace harm. Blake's team has gone silent. Her co-founders are distancing themselves, and Bernie, the one man who was supposed to take the fall, is now positioning himself as the state's star witness. But maybe the most brutal blow wasn't from the legal system. It was from her audience, because the internet never forgets. And once that mask slips, once the world sees behind the curtain, there's no putting it back on. This wasn't a PR failure. This was a collapse. From beloved actress to alleged architect of a toxic empire, from female empowerment icon to accused manipulator. And if this is what we know now, imagine what's still waiting to surface at trial. Because the next time Blake Lively walks into that courtroom, it won't be quiet, it won't be procedural, and it won't be survivable. Not for her brand, not for her name, and possibly not for her freedom.